thank you for joining us today. I am Angie Matthewson, and today my topic is adrenal fatigue and whether it's real. And I promise not to delve too much into any questions of philosophy about reality. I am one of the registered dietitians, oncology nutrition specialists here at Florida Cancer Specialists. April, who you see most of the time here, is one of the others. We've got seven or so others beyond that too. That is who I am. Thank you. And let's dive right into adrenal fatigue. So how many of you have had this list of complaints? Give or take a few extras. Always tired, no energy, can't focus. Um, Always tired, right? Um, that is common, unfortunately. And sometimes it gets to the point where someone feels like they may have something medically going on. And so they want to explore that with their doctor, right? People want answers. They don't want to just go through life feeling no energy, tired, and unable to focus on the things they enjoy. Unfortunately, there are many times when a medical doctor doesn't have an answer. They may run some labs, vitamin levels, or, give the person a full exam, and still not be able to come up with a diagnosis, with a name to put on it, or a plan that satisfies the person, that feels like an answer. And since people want answers, and answers are at all of our fingertips, we might Google it. And something that I have heard in different arenas of my life, mom groups or yoga classes, I've heard and I've seen it on the internet quite a bit, is this idea of adrenal fatigue. And it is a concept that people are drawn to when they are suffering from these very real symptoms. But is it real itself? I'm going to start with a little review, some anatomy and physiology 101. I remember that being one of my favorite classes. Hopefully you'll enjoy this. We've got two adrenal glands, one on top of each kidney. I really liked this picture, made them look especially like a hat. That is how I saw them described in a lot of the literature. And they're part of our endocrine system. Uh, so they make hormones, all kinds of them, but a few that the one I'm going to talk about mainly is cortisol, but they also make aldosterone, which functions with our blood pressure, as well as adrenaline, also known as epinephrine. So you could guess, very important functions it's involved in include our metabolism, our immune response, our blood pressure, and stress response. So stress response is going to be my big focus today, in regards to what the adrenal glands do. So they're actually part of this whole endocrine axis, called I love a good axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. So this is all part of our stress response, these three glands. And initially, it's all directed by our sympathetic nervous system. Near immediate, you encounter a stress, epinephrine or adrenaline and norepinephrine fire out, and they increase your heart rate and your perspiration so that you can quickly respond to stress. We think about this as fight or flight. Our heart rate goes up, we might perspire a little bit. From an evolution standpoint, that's good, right? You can run faster and longer, and you can stay cool if your heart's beating fast and you're perspiring. The next thing is the stimulation of that HPA axis. And it's considered a chronic stressor apparently after 10 seconds. So I thought, language is funny. But so after about 10 seconds of facing this stress, the HPA axis kicks in. And that's where the hypothalamus, I've got a picture, don't worry, releases one of its hormones, corticotrophin releasing hormone, which goes to the pituitary gland, real nearby, which then releases adrenocorticotrophic hormone, which goes to the adrenal glands, which then release the cortisol that I was talking about before. And that goes to the liver and tells it to release stored glucose. The liver does a lot of things. One of the things is store glucose. So when it gets cortisol, it gives us extra glucose to provide longer term energy to deal with whatever the stressor is, whether it's a bear or a tiger or a report due 15 minutes that we didn't know about. The corticotropin releasing hormone also goes back and stimulates the sympathetic nervous system to keep doing what it was doing. So our hearts stay up and we might keep sweating a little bit more as the stress becomes chronic. So here's that picture I promised. And just, if you were a word person, you've got the slide before. If you're a picture person, here it is. So the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland are up here near our brainstem, right in the middle of our old skulls here. And the CRH comes first, and then the HCTH, and then it goes down to our adrenal glands. So one of the things that I liked about this picture was, as I'm researching this, I was wondering why it's considered adrenal fatigue, why that was the title and not HPA fatigue or hypothalamus fatigue. But at any rate, then you can see the cortisol goes off and goes into the liver. So cortisol is super important. It's got a lot of good functions from the standpoint of an immediate stressor. It's definitely going to improve your chance of survival. So again, especially if that is, 10,000 years ago and you're trying to get away from a tiger or something, you are going to have a better chance if your cortisol is functioning properly. Um, it is also increasing the glucose uptake in your brain. So that can be good for problem solving in a moment of stress. And, as we are charging forth in our day, we might be damaging some tissues, and the cortisol, just muscle wear and tear. The cortisol in our system is going to increase substances that help us repair the tissues. It also decreases non-essential functions. So I'm using my air quotes because they're not exactly non-essential, right? I really like my immune system and digestive system to work well. It was great the couple of times my reproductive system worked well. And then just growing, whether that's kids growing or growing new skin cells. They're not non-essential, but to get away from an immediate stress, they are non-essential. So cortisol decreases the energy sent to those systems. So there are times when not enough cortisol and other adrenal hormones are happening. So the adrenal glands sometimes do not make enough of the hormones, and that is a medically recognized diagnosis called adrenal insufficiency. There is one primary insufficiency, which we call Addison's disease. It's very rare, and for reasons. The adrenal glands themselves are not making adequate hormones, including cortisol. Secondary insufficiency is more frequent, still not common, and it happens related to other medications or disease states, and it is a failure of the pituitary gland to send its signal that has the adrenal glands making cortisol. Adrenal fatigue, on the other hand, is not a medically recognized diagnosis. It's a theory that is somewhat popular on some online forums, some of the wellness influencers, and things like that. The claim is, the lab tests that doctors would use to test for adrenal insufficiency, that they're not adequate to pick this up, but that our bodies perceive it. And it's chronic, they stated as chronic stress exposure, leading to the adrenal glands falling behind so that they are not making enough cortisol. They basically can't keep up with this perpetual state of fight or flight that our modern society puts us in. So as I was reading these descriptions, it sprung to my head this picture of Lucy and Ethel in their infamous escapade in the chocolate factory. Hopefully I'm not the only one who remembers this. With them, the factory line is just putting out more chocolates, and they're supposed to put them in the box, and they can't keep up. So they're going to all these ridiculous lengths to try to keep up, try to look like they're keeping up, but they're really not keeping up. So I was thinking, like, okay, so are my adrenal glands like Lucy and Ethel? We'll see that they are not. And yeah, so that's all about Lucy and Ethel for now. Some of the symptoms, and again, whether or not adrenal fatigue is a real thing, the symptoms certainly are. Folks I hear it a lot. Problems with sleeping, getting to sleep, or waking up when you are supposed to. People also have increased cravings for foods that they don't necessarily want to choose, like salty and sugary things, persistently low in energy, and therefore dependent on stimulants, meaning caffeine for the most part. A couple cups of coffee in the morning, maybe one in the afternoon. I've got a cup of tea that I'm working on after my cup of coffee this morning. Um, and there's this idea that I saw really closely intertwined with adrenal fatigue called tired and wired. And certainly that's something that I have felt. I thought the little portmanteau here, Twired, was pretty cute. I don't think it's extremely popular, but I liked it. We've all felt this feeling that you're in bed and you just can't sleep because your mind is spinning with deadlines, with, maybe something that's upset you, something you can't figure out. Um, all of those feelings are familiar, and for some people, they're often enough that they are seeking some kind of medical solution. So you can go online and you can find a diet for that. In this case, they call it the adrenal fatigue diet. I did see it called the AF diet. So some of the recommendations, first of all, the goal, as stated by most of the sites, was stabilize blood sugar and balance cortisol levels. And doing that by avoiding white sugar, white flour, soda, fried food, processed food, and artificial sweeteners. Instead, they advocate choosing lean protein, leafy greens, colorful vegetables, whole grains, lower sugar fruits, moderate sea salt, and healthy fats, and then to drink plenty of water. So I'm just curious if that sounds familiar to anyone, with maybe an exception here or there, maybe a detail, um, an I not dotted or something, because it sounded very familiar to me. It sounded a lot like a plant-based diet. There are a couple of things on some of the sites that maybe go beyond what I would actively recommend, or get more specific than I think is necessary, such as some of the sites tell you grass-fed beef or grass-fed butter are going to be better for your adrenal glands. Not a ton of evidence for anything of that sort, but certainly a plant-based diet is something that you will hear any of the FCS dietitians advocating every single day. So if you look at the Mediterranean diet pyramid, or if you prefer the New American Plate from American Institute for Cancer Society, excuse me, Cancer Research, they all come down to very similar, right? Most of your foods are from plant sources. The animal products that we choose are healthier fats, yes, like fish, and then our fats being more heart healthy as well, like olive oil, sweets, and red meat in moderation. So I have no problem necessarily with the diet recommendations. And if, thinking about it in terms of how it serves your adrenals or your endocrine system overall, if that is helpful to you, more power to you. What concerns me about this trend, as it's presented in many online forums, and similar trends, is it often comes with something for sale. And so that's where I kind of have the message of buyer beware. Are they selling you a subscription to their website, or are they selling a book, or a meal plan, or are they selling supplements? And I did see quite a few where supplements were for sale, and those might have been a mix of different kind of traditional vitamins, so, that we're used to seeing in our grocery stores, or there is also a growing interest in adaptogen supplements. Adaptogens are not new. They've been part of Eastern medicine for centuries, maybe more like millennia. They are The definition is it's like plants, leaves, roots. So I summarized leaves and roots to plants, but also fungi. So different mushrooms are popular, and the use would be to help your body respond to stress. Typically, when used in Eastern medicine, they are more to use in short terms versus like every day for the rest of your life. Um, In terms of what we have in our Western medicine, we typically recommend things that have controlled trials, randomized, double-blinded, all of those things. Not a lot of that exists at this point, but there is growing interest, right? Growing recognition that this may be useful to some people. It's not something that I can actively recommend just yet because of there's not those clinical control trials at this point. But you may see them. You may see them in different preparations, like just a pop in a pill or mixing into a tea, or little powders that you can add to different foods. And again, the interaction would be with that stress response via the HPA axis. So I've listed here, I made a little chart of a few very popular adaptogens or most um, popular adaptogens. I adapted this from a site Healthline. You can see that at the bottom. It's not perfect, but I do like the site a lot for topics like this because they don't, they strike a nice balance between skepticism and believing everything that's out there. So they give you kind of both sides and then let you draw your own conclusions. And they also always have like hyperlinks that you can click to read the actual study if you're interested. So you can see here that there are a lot of interesting claims for ashwagandha, right? Like how lovely to reduce stress and anxiety. There are some possible adverse side effects for most of them, like with the ashwagandha, might upset your stomach, and not to use it if you are pregnant or may become pregnant. Now, I listed the possible benefits along with the possible adverse effects. And I do want to point out, I'm absolutely aware that any prescription drug can have adverse effects as well. The difference is regulation. So at least in the United States, uh, prescription drugs are very carefully regulated. And some years ago, it was the 1990s, supplements are not FDA regulated. So there is not required. Something can be on the shelf and never have been looked at by someone outside the company making a profit from that. So that is a caution actually not just for this list of adaptogens or any other list of adaptogens. That also holds true for things like vitamin C or calcium. So if you are in need of those for different reasons, if you're concerned about your bone health and taking a calcium and D supplement, or if you're vegan and needing to take B12, you may actually want a vitamin supplement. Or if you're interested in an adaptogen and you do the research and decide you want to try that, make sure that it has some kind of third-party seal on it. And I have listed a few here that I am familiar with. There are others. So NSF is National Science Foundation, USP is US Pharmacopoeia, and then there's also Consumer Labs. So this just means that yes, the company does have to pay to get this seal, but if they don't pass, they don't get the seal. They don't put on their failed by NSF, but they just don't put the seal on it if they fail. So you can't just buy this. You have to pay for them to come in and examine it, but it's not just a pay for service kind of thing. Um, One that I also saw growing more is good manufacturing practices, or so there are others. And then USDA organic, you may see on things. All of those at least means someone has come in and looked at the process and that what they say is in it is in it. So I want to get back to Lucy and Ethel now, or kind of the opposite, right? Here we have a fully automated factory chocolate production, and all of those chocolates are going to go into their package. They kind of look like they might be the Queen Anne chocolate covered cherries. Those will be out on the shelves in droves very soon. Um, so Lucy and Ethel had trouble keeping up. In fact, our adrenal glands do not have trouble keeping up. They are more like the factory, unless we have primary or secondary insufficiency, you're not going to run out of cortisol. In fact, in times of stress, your adrenal glands are going to produce more cortisol. And we remember the list of what cortisol does that is good for us. Um, but there are also some bad effects of long-term overexposure. So this list might look pretty familiar. Anxiety, depression, digestive problems, headaches, muscle tension and pain, heart disease, sleep problem, weight gain, memory, and focus problems. So that is quite similar, some repetition to the list of what brings people to the concept of adrenal fatigue. Uh, so then we're thinking, okay, so you're saying it's just stress. Um, and I guess I kind of am saying it's just stress, but I'm going to use some more air quotes because stress is not a small thing, certainly not in our society today. 47% of Americans reported in a recent survey increased stress levels since the start of the COVID pandemic. I am personally still feeling that 3.5 years later, just extra stress in life or extra load of that stress. And 76% of adults say they had experienced health impacts due to stress in the prior month. So again, that's kind of it's the same list, honestly, from the last slide: digestive issues, weight gain, et cetera, et cetera, problems with the immune system, getting sick more often, sleep disruption, all of those very similar things. So saying it's stress related or could be stress related is not me saying, oh, it's just stress. So my proposal is let's maybe try to simplify some of whatever it is going on globally or regionally, or if it's just more personal to you. So we can call it what we want. We can call it cortisol overexposure. We can call it just stress. We can call it adrenal fatigue if we want to, but maybe we don't need to purchase special supplements or follow a particular diet. If adrenal fatigue is claimed to be related to too much stress, and I'm saying possibly it's actually the appropriate stress response can still have a problem, then my conclusion, and hopefully you'll share it, is all of us could benefit from stress management. So healthy diet, that's, kind of our department. And that is the plant-based diet in whatever form most appeals to you, clicks for you. Mindful eating is involved here too, and that means paying attention to what you're eating and why, and paying attention while you're eating it. Regular exercise of some form, meditation and deep breathing exercises. Actually, a lot of, again, newer research in this area. It's, meditation traditionally from more of our Eastern cultures, but getting a lot of interest here in the West and lots of research to back up the health benefits. Mental health care. If you need it, think you might need it, try it out. And cultivating your social support. Work-life balance is important for stress management, and good sleep hygiene. And it is not a joke. I think I could do a 30-minute talk on sleep hygiene and my intermittent successes with it. A lot of it is about turning off those screens, right? Like that tired part of the adrenal fatigue conversation. It's real, and it's, people keep their phone right in their face until the minute they go to bed. So I saw a bunch of different, 1 hour before bed up to 3 hours before bed. Wherever you are now, try to cut it back. That can help with sleep hygiene. um and then my question that you may have been thinking too is, but how? So it's a little bit of a catch-22. Like, if you are stressed and you are having trouble coping with your stress, how on earth are you going to implement these new behaviors that are going to help manage your stress? So I do have a couple of little tips. And the first one is take it one step at a time, maybe two or three things. If you see a couple of things on there that you could work on, 1 to 3 things. And I talk a lot about goal setting and how goal setting should be action oriented. I also always remind patients and friends and myself repeatedly that changes are never linear. This is a newer this picture here is a newer workup of something called stages of change. It used to be in a straight line, even while they were saying it's not linear. So this one is in a little circle, and you might not be thinking about it. You might be thinking about a change, getting ready for a change, making the change, maintaining the change, or relapsing, right? And the idea with putting it in a circle is that they might not come in order and they might fall from one to the other as well. Um, and at the center here is this idea of an upward spiral. And the upward spiral is the idea that we learn from each mistake or each misstep, however you want to term it. I also want to talk about with goal setting accountability. So if you're thinking of some things you might want to change in terms of your stress management or overall health, great. I'm always happy to talk about those. Um, Thinking it is kind of step one, that's contemplating, right? Then you write it down, and that's kind of the preparation, creating the action steps, and then telling a friend is the next level, right? Sharing it with someone. And if you can't think of a friend you want to tell, maybe it's your mom or maybe it is your therapist. Each one of these steps under accountability in research is actually associated with better chances of succeeding at the behavior change or long-term success, right? Not that you never have a relapse, but that you have long-term success. And the final step after telling a friend is to set up a weekly or at least regular check-in, if that's texting or if that's calling or seeing in person. Okay, so action and accountability and taking things one step at a time are my basics for goal setting. And then this upward spiral leads us to a growth mindset. And I really often feel like I'm being a little cheerleader when I talk about things like this, but it really is true that missteps are going to happen. We can call them failure. We don't have to, but if we call them failure, recognizing that that doesn't mean we haven't succeeded. It means we found a way that didn't work. And we can either focus on that misstep or we can focus on the next step. So there's this idea of positive self-talk, and it's well researched also. The more you do it, the more you believe it. And if you are in the mindset of thinking you can achieve something, you are more likely to achieve it. So it doesn't matter if the thought is true. I mean, in this case, the truth is relative, right? So if it is an unhelpful thought, work to change it, questioning your inner critic. Back to evolution and our cortisol response, right? And running from the bear, your inner critic is there for a reason, right? It's to question whether you can climb that tree or not, right? Or if you're going to fall out of that tree. But in our modern society, it's often doing things it doesn't need to do, telling us we can't do things that we probably can. So keeping that all in mind as you think about this concept of what's impacting my health, is it something that could do with a little more stress management or changes for some other reason?